everybody. I want to welcome you to this next Kabbalistic Pathworking class. This one is on the path of Mem. I accidentally called it the path of Nun in the invocation, but that's okay. I'm sure that you guys figured it out. How's everybody doing today? I want to wish those of you who are mothers and who have mothers a happy Mother's Day. I actually think it's very fortuitous that this particular class, the Path of Mem, is happening on Mother's Day, because there wasn't a conscious plan for that, but there's actually a huge number of names for mother in world languages that begin with M or have an M prominently within them. So the Mem, the M sound, is very maternal in its orientation. So this is very fortuitous that we happen to have chosen this time period. Additionally, there's a Tibetan Buddhist teaching that I think is very relevant to this, the energy of this week's class, and in general the path of spiritual awakening that we get to discuss because of the fact that this is Mother's Day, and that is that since reincarnation has been going on infinitely into the past and will go on infinitely into the future, all beings in the universe have at one time or another been our mother and have given everything to care for us and support us. And so treating everybody as our mother and giving them that loving kindness is only naturally, since all beings have been our mother at one time or another. So, yes, the path of Mem has to do, Mem, the Hebrew word Mem means water, and of course the elements of earth and water are both associated with the feminine principle and hence with motherhood quite directly. Sure. The cup that contains water is another symbol of the feminine receptive principle. But to begin with, I want to talk about the path of Nun and people's experiences with it over the past couple of weeks. So I know that there are probably some interesting experiences that people have had, or challenges, or delight that people have experienced. So go ahead and let me know what your experience of the path was like. And for those of you who did it before the class, I'm wondering if you have gone on and done it again since the class. That would be Juan. I think Rendusa was the other one who'd done it beforehand. Are you guys hearing me all right? I feel like my volume button isn't as present as usual. Well, good. Good. So my experience with the path of Nun has always been one that is, it's challenging, accepting that our personal self is not a permanent thing. Ultimately, that we're walking this earth our one time as this person, as Jason, as Brendusa, as Kevin, Swan. But this is our one time in those forms. We may come back an infinite number of times in other forms. This is the one time when we are who we are now. That's a melancholy experience, but ultimately one that's a call to action, and also a call to not take oneself too seriously. One says that he's done it several times this week, each time finding a more comforting peace with past souls in my personal life, those living as well as those who have passed on. I did the death circle of salt and actually did die to some old ways. I feel like a new person risen from the dead. Are you talking about the New Hermetics work as well as this path? I guess those two have sort of coincided in some way in this in this particular run for you, not for everybody, but for you. Sure. That's excellent. Yeah, synchronicity, as well as the Mother's Day synchronicity. It's all very meaningful. Did anyone have any challenges with this particular path? Conversely, did anyone find that it was the most simple or one of the simpler paths to deal with? Brendusa said, I was in chose hell. I'm not sure what that sentence construction means, Brendusa. I mean, you were struggling with some things. Yeah. This has been a little bit of a challenging time for my family. We've been having a lot of illnesses, and then we've also been having some plumbing issues in the house too, so we've just been working pretty hard. Rendine says, in some traditions it is said that when I think you missed a one finds their true will or destiny in this life, it will be totally different from everything one knows. Yeah, that can be. Sometimes it can be intimately close to what you're already doing now as well. Just depends on, the circumstances of one's life. Sometimes we're hurtled into circumstances that are quite contrary to our nature and what we're meant to do. Other times we're hurled into circumstances that are quite conducive to it. Like, for instance, Mozart, I don't think that he was doing the wrong thing for himself, although ultimately his life was short and self-destructive. He still was doing what seemed to be his true will from a very early age and was supported in doing so by his parents. So, one can't make any kind of blanket statement like that. I think that those kind of blanket statements are a bit misleading, especially if you're feeling confused about where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. You may start just thinking, well, if I just do the opposite of what I'm doing now, I'll be heading in the right direction. And in some cases that might be the case. In other cases, you may already be doing what you're supposed to be doing, and just simply the work of spiritual unfoldment is just simply to allow you to do it more effectively. Brendy says, and the death is part of letting all those faraway places. Yeah, I mean, certainly letting go of one's limited ego self, at least for a limited time, is quite useful in determining what trajectory things are on. And because the ego is a constellation that has been created largely, even though it seems like it's self-created, it's largely been created by our environment. What our parents told us was the right thing to do, what our instructors in life have told us the right things to do are. And in many ways, it actually acts as an encapsulator that holds us within a limited perspective on what's possible for us. So certainly stepping outside of that through this sort of a practice or related ones can be incredibly useful. Certainly the idea of death and rebirth is central in virtually all religious practices. In one way or another, we're reborn into a new kind of a life. Brendu says, right, we are brainwashed since infancy. Not in a negative way necessarily, although sometimes in a negative way, but for the most part, people are just trying to help us, but they're operating from their own limited perspective that was installed in them, and so they're just perpetuating a tribal consciousness that we've been embedded in for centuries. And things change slowly over time, but part of the reason for spiritual work is to help to hasten that process, to help us to move towards a more enlightened world society or world societies in the most efficient way possible by bringing ourselves into a state of freedom and then sharing that freedom with others. Juan says, I did not find this path more so about letting go than coming to an understanding of the whys you must let go. And I think that's true. You know, and really these path workings are largely that. They're instructional, and you can take the instructions or not as you go along. You know, and so I mean, it's presenting you with a possibility that's in front of you, and you have to step through and let go of the things yourself. You know, the recording can't force you to do that. Brendusa says that in her case, the brainwashing that she received was negative, I think is what she's saying. Well, and that's too bad. But, you know, I think that to an extent, all of it is negative. What I mean is that the intentions behind it aren't necessarily, you know, truly to harm you, just simply to move you in the direction that is viewed as safe, even if that's not necessarily the best one for you. Robin asked, does the wording of the recording help to work on the subconsciousness, though? Well, in the higher consciousness, it helps to create a bridge between your consciousness and the elements of higher consciousness. Absolutely. It's just that, you know, there's a relationship that needs to be created with all the different parts of yourself and putting them into alignment. And you know, the recordings can help to kind of guide you along that pathway, but they can't obviously force you to make changes. Otherwise, they'd become mandatory, and everyone would have to listen to them. So the purpose is to help you to evolve in the most efficient way possible, but it still does require your participation. Okay, Robin says, for myself, trying to work with changing my subconscious is the part that has been difficult for me. Now, you don't need to is going on in your subconscious, but I'm curious what you mean by that statement. Do you feel that there are elements of your subconscious that are propelling you in negative directions or in directions that are not useful for your... Robin says she's always aware of her conscious self. Yet she knows that there are subconscious things that should be working for my good also. Rohan, you're listening to Mem again. You're jumping ahead. We'll talk about the path of Mem in a moment. The subconscious, we're getting a little jargony here, and that, sometimes that can be good, and sometimes it can lead to confusion when people have different definitions. But I'm just going to describe to you my definition of the subconscious, which is essentially the part of your brain, body complex, psyche, greater than body complex, that is reactive and attempts to create equilibrium in yourself. And attempts to run things as efficiently as possible. So your subconscious is very susceptible to transformation. It basically is just trying to run the programs that you or others have installed in you in the best way possible. So anytime you listen to something that's a more constructive set of beliefs, values, and actions, your subconscious will take those up if the whole of your consciousness is in alignment with those things. In other words, if I gave you a recording to stop smoking and you physically sat there and smoked while you listened to it, it really wouldn't have that much of an impact on you. It's not until your conscious mind has a decision to make that change, that your subconscious mind can really begin to be programmed to make that transformation. You have to have made a firm decision, and then the programming can start to kind of help to move things along more efficiently. Now, I'm going to check out some of these things that people are saying in here. Robin says, there are some people who are able to be aware of their subconscious self. I'd like to be able to do that at some point also. Well, there's nothing to be aware of or not aware of with that. I mean, it's just simply a function of consciousness. If you notice your heartbeat or you notice the breathing process that's going on when you're not trying to control it, that's your subconscious in action. That's your subconscious self. Jeremy says, hi, Jeremy. Welcome. I think this is your first time coming. And Jeremy, you and I have met, right? So, Jeremy, I'm actually making a commitment. I'm publicly stating it now, so now I'm going to be in trouble if I don't actually do this. But I'm making a commitment to get all of the past recordings done this week. It's been something that I've been just getting caught up in other things and unable to do. So, if you want to get caught up with the past ones, hopefully by the end of this week they'll all be up, available for free download on my site. Jeremy says, sometimes I personally have outward symptoms of negative emotions, but I'm not aware of why I'm feeling that way or where they are coming from. As an empath, that can be difficult to know if it is my emotions or if I'm picking up on others' feelings. LOL. That is absolutely an issue that people who are in the, what I call the psychic trade, have to contend with. Because certainly, I mean, that's true of the impressions that come to you as well. If you're acting as a psychic counselor, you can have imagery come to your mind. Is that imagery something that's related to your client, or is it something related to your relationship with the client, or is it something completely unrelated? That's always an issue. And the subconscious is in fact the territory through which that material is coming up. And some of it is coming in from higher self, some of it is coming in from the environment, some of it is coming in from deeper inside yourself. There's all different kinds of avenues which things kind of move through that territory. The essence of the matter, though, is that if it's coming to you, Jeremy and Robin, but I'm going to address this to Jeremy right now because he's asking a specific question. If it's coming to you at this time when you're working with somebody, there's some meaning in there about the person. And it may not be, if you don't feel like it's something that you should share, you don't necessarily have to share it. But sharing what you're experiencing isn't necessarily going to, it doesn't, let's say, for instance, you're massaging or doing Reiki and so on, and you start to feel a prickly feeling inside of you. If you say to the person, I'm feeling a prickly feeling inside of myself right now as I'm doing this with you, that's not necessarily throwing that on the person. It's just simply sharing what your experience is. And it may be that they're feeling that same prickly feeling or something related to that, or they may say, well, I just had a bad, fight with my wife, and that's probably why you're feeling that. That just simply sharing it is probably the best thing to do without saying you're sending off negative vibrations to me or something like that. Take responsibility for yourself and just say, I'm experiencing this. I think that's the easiest way of honoring what the subconscious is throwing up at you without necessarily blaming it on the other person or just internalizing it. It's a way of turning it into a dyadic experience. So now, Robin says, understood there needs to be a conscious-subconscious harmony for things to work the way someone wants to, a change or something. By being aware of the subconscious, though, I want to be able to see the things happening around me, being said around me, etc., that are affecting me in a way I prefer it not, and then be able to block it from entering my subconscious. When saying I'm experiencing, though, are we subconsciously accepting that then? Well, here's the thing, Robin. This is one of the reasons why people end up going into monasteries and so forth, because they don't want to be affected by those things. But basically, your progress is made more easy in that kind of environment, but ultimately it's much slower, because the things that are coming into your consciousness that are affecting it, that are bombarding you and and bringing up the stuff that's uncomfortable inside you, that's exactly the material that you need to work on in order to free your consciousness and enable you to be of more service to the universe. You know, the things that are bothering you, the things that are triggering you, that you may or may not even be aware of, your increased awareness of those things, and you're learning to accept them and to do different things with them, is exactly what the work of consciousness awakening is. And Robin says that she's a pleasure seeker. Of course, and there's nothing wrong with pleasure. And you know, it's important to not feel like you aren't allowed pleasure. You know, I mean, the Buddha, who taught that all is suffering, the teaching that he was trying to teach was to help people to become happy. But in order to really become happy, you basically have to no longer make you have to no longer resist anything that's coming at you, and that's true happiness. You know, whatever goes on. The path at this point is shifting. What we've been moving into so far in this course of recordings has been towards this sense of fusion, this sense of unity, this sense of you know, connection, interconnection, and hopefully an ecstatic interconnection with yourself and the universe. Now, we don't operate that way at all times. If we were in a state of fusion 24/7, there wouldn't be anything going on in the universe anymore. It would all just be one white ball of nothing. Brendine wants to ask a question, so I'm going to just read what it is. You mentioned prickly feelings. We have been getting that often during the matrix and other times when using the energy. What is with prickly feelings? Well, I don't want to make too many assumptions about, you know, obviously there's different things that could be called prickly feelings. I'll just share what my experience of it is. It usually means that the person is angry. That's been my perception when I feel that, and or my observation after the fact when I experience it, and then I say, well, what's going on with this person? So there's probably someone or some ones who are experiencing some anger in the work that you're doing and who are working through it. And usually what I find is that they're not angry at me, they're just simply in a state of anger, agitation, frustration at the world. Sometimes it's because they've been made to wait longer than they'd like to before they get to see me. That's often the case. So we've been working towards this fusion, towards this sense of all is one, and that ultimately is true in a sense. We are all one, but we are all also separate too. We are all also doing our own thing. Now, what's happening with the path of Mem? It's probably the most important of the paths that we've been working on. It may be the most important of all. Ultimately, it probably is, although it's hard to make those kinds of blanket statements. What's happening there, and here is the issue that we face at this point. Not all of you, and myself included, are fully equipped to handle all of what the path of Mem is about. So to an extent, you're going to be experiencing it, and then the rest of the work that we do moving forward is going to be helping you to perfect what the work of the path of Mem is. In the tarot, the path of Mem is represented in the Golden Dawn system as the Hanged Man. Now, this is an odd symbol for the path of Mem, since, as Kevin pointed out, Mem is water, and there's in most renderings, and occasionally there will be some water in one of the renderings, but in most renderings, there's no water. In fact, there's the tree or the wood that's represented, and then the person is hanging in the air. So it seems odd. Now, Aleister Crowley's version is rather different. I don't know if you can see this picture very well, and it's quite sort of stylized, but his idea was that basically the Hanged Man was actually floating in a sea of consciousness, right, in the ocean itself. But the most important part of the Hanged Man is the fact that he's hanged. He's upside down. He's no longer got his feet on the earth with his head towards the heavens. He's got his feet in the heavens with his head towards the earth. And there's a few different things represented by that. One is the idea of self-sacrifice. Ultimately, the death that we experience with the path of Nun is sort of made plain in this. The idea of the sacrificial tree that we experienced in all the entrances into Tiferet are well represented in this image of a person hanged, letting go of their physical corporeal form and moving into a spiritual form. Of course, the Christ mythos has that as its central mystery, but it's also a central mystery in all religions that deal with the idea of an eternal soul. The physical form, the physical descriptors disappear, and the spiritual essence moves on. Rendusa is giving some information on the path there. And Robin's asking a question. I'll try and answer that in a minute. But the other significance, though, is the upside down nature itself. The fact that in all of our previous work on the tree, we have been striving upward towards the divine, towards self-actualization, towards self-realization. We've been seeking things out for ourselves, all spiritual things, to connect with the spirit and to become a better person, a more enlightened person, a wiser person, a more spiritual person, all those things. But those are ultimately things that we've been doing for ourselves. At the point of the path of Mem, it reverses. Instead of asking what we can do for ourselves, how we can make ourselves better, we begin to ask instead how we can give. Since since we've recognized that we are the source of the light, we are at one with the universe, how can we then share this with others? How can we be of service? How can we give? Instead of what can I have, we ask what can I give? How can I give it? How can I give more completely? How can I share myself more truly? How can I share this divine essence that's inside of me more completely? This is the message of this path, and the work of the path is really simply about transmuting the negative, painful, agitated that are around us within ourselves, into positive, radiant, loving, accepting energy, which is it's a tough job, but it's ultimately the job of all people who would want to call themselves adepts, who would want to call themselves, divine workers, light workers. The negativity of the world which is just an appearance to a large extent, and when you think about yourself as divine essence, you recognize it as such. But still, it needs to be transformed, and the cauldron, the alchemical athanor of its transformation is right here inside of me. Someone comes to me and says, "Ooh, I'm very angry at you, and you're a mean person," and instead of mirroring that back, I take it in and I transform it into love, which is what I reflect outward. That's the work of this path. Now, Juan is saying something here, so I'm going to read what he's saying here. Mem is by and large your most incredible work. I have been at it several times this week, with the final outcome, at least at this point, a complete settlement of wars within my own inner world. Perhaps the very best and most amazing result from Mem is that it was the very first time I no longer held a monologue with myself. In other words, there was total silence, and the silence freaked me the hell out of having my heart race at 100 miles. Transmutation of energy, yes, you hit the nail there. Then Brendine says, "Thanks, Juan, for sharing your monologue issues. Nice to see your human side, LOL." Robin says, "Thank you for the information on the message of the path, Jason. When working with this path, we'll try to keep the primary focus of giving of the self, and yet more ways have already been working on absorbing anger from others and transmuting it, then sending it back out to the person." Juan says, LOL. So, yes, and that is ultimately the goal of all of the previous programs, was to help you to come to the realization that that's really the only sensible thing to be doing. So I'm glad that you were subconsciously, at least, Robin, changing your programming and working on that, and maybe you've even been working on it before you even started listening to this with me. And that's so ultimately we're all working on the same page anyway. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this path, Brendu, so this is a good point about Chod, and I'll try and get back to that in a minute. The interesting thing about this path is it goes into Gevura, which is the path associated with the energies of Mars. Gevura means severity. It's sometimes called Din, and it's associated with justice and the meeting out of punishments for the wicked, and it's interesting that the message that I have given you is one of conciliation and peace and love and transmuting negativity into positivity, and yet the path that it leads into is one of strength and force and vigor and anger, and divine wrath, I should say, rather than anger. And one of the parts of the meditation that I want you to consider as you're exploring this is that, in fact, the energy that's coming from Gevura that can go towards divine wrath or towards any number of different directions is a raw energy. It's an energy that can be put in multiple directions. And our job as conscious beings is to choose which direction it's going to go. It is a red, fiery, intense energy, and we can use it to become, vessels of punishment and retribution, and take on, personal quests to fight the negative establishment, or we can take on demented tasks like killing people who we imagine are villains or so forth. But it can take an entirely different direction as well. That fire can just become a fire of divine love, which we share in a beautiful way, and turn that intensity in. And that's really the message that most spiritual teachers are trying to share. Now, there's a tremendous amount of stuff that's been being written here. I feel like you guys are hardly listening to me. You're writing so much on the side here. So we're just going to go check this out. Okay, so Bendusa says, the Hanged Man, the Path of Mem, connects Hod and Geburah on the Pillar of Severity. It is also a connecting channel between the personality and the higher self, although its initiatory implications are very different from the three paths leading into Tiferet. This path and the symbolism of the card is a complete departure from anything previously encountered. Is that a quote from Kabbalistic Tarot by Robert Wang? I'm not sure. So everything that she said there is basically what I was communicating as well. Now, the interesting thing from an experiential position, as someone listening to these recordings, is you're going to go from this sort of blissful sea of energies and with some negative stuff that you're transforming, and all of a sudden you're just going to boom go into this red Geburah field. And what I want you to recognize as you're doing so is that what you're entering into is the energy, the power of the universe as it these two Chesed and Geburah are kind of opposite poles of power within the universe, and you're going to approach Chesed a little bit later. So for now we're working with Geburah, but Geburah is this intense, outward flowing, manifesting energy, and so the work that you're doing is connected, and it will yield interesting. So that's right in the second path of Sheen, which I don't know if you've explored that, Jeremy. But yeah, I mean, this is ultimately that Sheen energy is a reflection of that Geburah energy for sure. And Brandine actually says in the next line, "Fire like Sheen, possibly," and then Kevin says, "LOL." Jason says, "LOL," since he wasn't reading as he was talking. Juan says, "The wise person holds ideas and thoughts that are opposite to those held by the masses, and the result is the experience of absolute freedom." Produces. Robin says, "Agreed, Juan." Juan says, "One must be willing to suspend the mental machine so that you may see in the mirror of truth." Juan says, "Sounds breaking up. Are you saying that you are having trouble hearing me?" Brendusa says, "That's exactly what happened to me, going from the path of temperance to the next two paths, the noon, and I'm sure in men, without even knowing it, just the universe is pouring the energy into my body." That'll be a bummer if that's happening in the recording, Juan. So, you guys are all experiencing a lot of divine influx into yourself, and so the path of Mem, to a large extent, is about taking that experience, recognizing that ultimately you are the source of those things, that there isn't a separate area where those are coming from. They're all you and within all people. So the essence of what you are here to do is to share love with the people around you, and to bring a loving balance into the universe, which is one of the things that mothers do, and why this particular class is so appropriate to have on our extremely secular holiday called Mother's Day. It still has a divine meaning, which is that of, giving of your stuff and holding the love of the universe for others until they're able to hold it themselves. So, Juan says, with Mem I find one has to be willing to enjoy the silence. And indeed, hopefully the silence will just become a natural expression, natural position. So, our work here is at a complete, unless there are some more questions about this path. It's a very important one, and one that I hope that you'll get a lot of benefit from. But again, for those of you who sometimes feel like you're struggling with the inner dialogue and questioning things, simply realize that this is the first step in this new direction, and there are still additional steps of kind of self-analysis and letting go of things and moving in order to perfect yourself as a vehicle for this divine expression. So you don't need to feel intimidated by it, or like there is a that you're not supposed to be doing this or something. Even if you're still struggling with some personality stuff, it's absolutely to be expected. There's no one who doesn't have questions or doubts about things. I mean, it seems like the Dalai Lama, one of our sort of exemplars of enlightened life, he's full of self-doubt all the time, and is constantly telling people to not treat him like an enlightened being. So the essence of expressing the divine is not necessarily feeling perfected, but simply that one wants to be a caring and loving individual, and to push that message into the world in a non-pushy way. That's the other element that's important in this, is that don't mistake this for an excuse to go around and starting to tell other people that they're not leading their life correctly or something like that. Just simply be positive and be loving, rather than trying to project your trip onto other people. Robin says the safety, security of the class and those involved here are comforting. I agree. I think this is a very nice group of people, and one that I'm glad that we're all exploring this together here. Producer says, I feel I'm on the right path doing this deep work, cleansing of things from seed level. I like that, the seed level. That's an important concept to have in mind, is that there are seeds of things that we all have planted in ourselves, and they can grow in positive and negative ways, and some seeds would be well to remove from the garden altogether, and some seeds would be good to help to flourish. Juan says, Jason, again, the work in Mem is truly incredible. Having meditated for many years, this is really the very first time I can honestly say I've reached a point of total quiet. Well, I'm really glad to hear that, Juan. Kevin said, totally transforming, great experiences, learning daily and growing in unity with all. You guys are great. And again, happy Mother's Day to all of you, since at one time or another all of you were my mother and gave everything for me, so I appreciate that. You're all good teachers for me, too. Alex isn't here today. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Alex, you're missed. And I will definitely get these recordings up. I basically have to manually record them off of the internet and then turn them into MP3s and put them back up. But it's just a few hours, so I'm going to make sure I do it. Jeremy, I really appreciate you coming. It's nice to see your name there. I saw that you'd signed up, and I thought, is Jeremy really going to start coming to this? That's great. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day. And I'll see you all in 2 weeks.